Scott asked me to give a little bit of an overview of what Gangplank is, and I think that it's important to really look deeper than the surface level of Gangplank. And so I just wanted to take 20-30 minutes to kind of go over what Gangplank is and why it's important to Tucson, or why I think it's important to Tucson. So I want to start with a few questions. So the first one is, do you currently love the work you do? Raise your hand if you currently love the work that you do. Oh, we've got quite a few. I define loving the work that you do is that if you hit the snooze button more than one time during the week, you do not truly love the work that you do. You might think you love the work that you do, but you don't really love the work that you do. Do you run your own company or do you want to? Raise your hand. Okay, pretty good target piece there. Do you think you have the ability to change the world? A few more.
Occupy Gangplank.
So I want to talk a little bit about hacking innovation, because I think at the end of the day, to me, that's really what the roots of Gangplank started as. And I think they serve as a basis for much more than that. And so I want to talk about a little bit of a story from a past. I'm a systems thinker. I like to sit back and I like to look at the way that things work, and I like to decompose them, and I like to say, how could we improve them? How could they be different? What makes them successful? And so, I've lived in Arizona for, about 35 years now, and I've had a good chance to look at Arizona and decompose some of the systems of Arizona. I was, raised by somebody who moved here from the Midwest, who absolutely loved the desert, and made sure that I got to see every part of this state on a regular basis. Hiked the Grand Canyon every year, seen every state park, seen every. So I've been through most of Arizona in over a long extended period of time. And so, I want to kind of decompose how I see the story of Arizona rolling out. So, and I want to compare it specifically to entrepreneurship. So in 1902, we had the National Reclamation Act, all right? And to me, this was a key piece of infrastructure that was built. And what it did is it gave permission for Arizonans to dam water. Now, if you were here in 1902, you probably lived within a half a mile of a river, because otherwise you would have died. 1902 changed that, or at least set in place legislation or key pieces that would allow the way that water is served. Okay? And this really came on to become something that still exists today, which is called the Salt River Project. It's one of the first key pieces that took advantage of this. Okay? In 1956, there's the Interstate Highway System. The Federal Aid Highway Act was involved. Okay? But before 1956, getting to Arizona, not so easy. Okay? Another piece of infrastructure. If you haven't caught on yet, infrastructure is important for growth in entrepreneurial ventures. Can you imagine running your company today without internet? Or if internet cost you, anybody who's gone abroad and had their smartphone tell them it's going to cost them $15 a megabyte for roaming data, can understand what it might be like to run their business without key pieces of infrastructure. In 1950s, and this was kind of the linchpin here, and that's that we got air conditioning and cheap land. Okay? Once we had water, once we had a way to get here, and ultimately once this place actually became inhabitable by people that did not think that 100+ degrees was too warm, we really had opportunity. Right? So for the first time, Arizona had opportunity. And the opportunity was cheap land that people wanted. Okay? So in a normal business, you have some form of opportunity. You've got something out there. You've got something that people want. Right? People took that and they got creative. All right? They did something that is unique to the Southwest, and that is they didn't build central cities. They started to build suburbs. They started to build out instead of up. They started to take advantage of cheap land. They started to take advantage of a surplus of water where there hadn't been water before. They started to take surplus of interstate systems that took across the whole piece. Right? They remixed it. The numbers you see there, in 1910, there were 295,000 people in Arizona. In 1970, there was 1.7 million people in Arizona. That's only about a 20% increase or so every year to get to that number. From 1970 to 2010, 6.3 million people. That's about a 40% growth rate year over year to get to that number. Pretty significant change. We saw an iterative system building happen. We started to see some emergence, right? We started to see, if you looked how the original settlers of this place built their houses, and you can now see how about every house built in the last 20 years looks. There's a lot of iterations, right? If you see a lot of the older homes, they look more like the adobe structures that were, pictured there at Montezuma's castle, right? Fierce market competition kind of drove excellence. Right? So if you looked at the Phoenix market, I'm sure it's the same here in Tucson. You've got Oro Valley, Verde, Tanque Verde, a number of different neighbors. They're all fighting for resources, which are people who will pay them tax dollars. Right? And so they get fiercely competitive about who's going to land what, who's going to land what deal. And I think part of that starts to drive a little bit of excellence, right? Because each city wants to be better than their neighbor city, because they know if they're better than their neighbor city, that they're going to attract more people. Right? And so I think we can say the same thing about entrepreneurship. We can say that the more excellence is out there, right? The more competition that's out there, the more excellence, or the higher the bar gets raised, right? So I'm here to say that's entrepreneurship 1.0, or we can call it 2.0, whatever you want to call it, put whatever number, but it's the current way of doing things. And before you all think I'm crazy, I think we have to say, have we created some problems in Arizona by doing that? Were we really thinking about the future of Arizona when we started to build those things? And it's funny that we think of it now and see how screwed up it is. But the truth is, the people that were doing it in 1980 were pioneers. I mean, these people were on every magazine as being the future city builders, that they had it all figured out, that they were having 40% growth rate, while cities like Detroit were starting to get people sucked out of them, by a 40% loss rate. Right? So everybody sat there and looked and said, oh, these guys are fabulous, they're great, look at all the things Nevada and Arizona are doing. They are the future of America, the future, the way to build cities. Do we think that today? As an Arizonan, do you think we have problems because of the way we build things? Do you think that we were big picture thinkers in 1970 when we got air conditioning and water and an interstate system? What if we had the chance to do it over again? What if we had the chance to say, that's not the Arizona that we really want, and we had a chance to reset and do it? To me, we've got a global economic crisis. I think everybody in Arizona knows this. Maybe some other cities they don't. I think in Arizona, we know that we have an economic crisis. And when I say crisis, I don't mean that we're in the middle of a depression. I don't mean that we're in the middle of a recession. I mean that we are in one of those rare 100 to 150 year shifts where the entire way we think about economic development, economic growth, and the way people interact and the way society is built are fundamentally changing. We are in the middle of a reset. Okay? This happened about 100, 150 years ago. We used to have 90% of the people on this planet created the food for this planet. Today, about 10% of the people create enough food for the people on this planet. That's a major shift from an agricultural society to a production society. We're in the middle of the same kind of shift where 90% of the people who are doing production work are being displaced, and those jobs aren't coming back in the same way that the farm jobs did not come back. And we're having to figure out how we shift that. Okay? This is our chance to reset, especially in Arizona. So it's time for a revolution. It's time for us to say, what can we do to make Arizona be the leader? Meaning, we have an opportunity to turn a crisis into the best opportunity this state has ever seen. Because we've got nothing to lose. If you're in New York, if you're in San Francisco, and you're in Chicago, you probably have something worth losing because you're not feeling it hard. When you are in Arizona, there's not a whole lot to look forward to. There's not. I love this place. It's one of the most beautiful places. But from an opportunity perspective, from economics, you're probably stupid if you're here doing business. But we have the opportunity now to say that because we don't have anything to lose, we can make the radical things happen. We can take the risks that other people are too afraid to take because they have something to lose. So we can either seize this opportunity in this crisis and turn Arizona into a leader, or we can tuck our tail between our legs and just take it, or we can move. Those are our choices. I like to say that it's really about evolution. I think we've got the chance in Arizona to say, let's make it about the people. Right now, that's what we have. We have people who are passionate. We have people that are pioneers. We inhabited a desert that killed all living creatures in it except for reptiles. Okay? We've got what it takes to move forward, but we have to do it together. And so I would like to encourage you that if you are a business owner, or you want to be a business owner, you want to do what you're passionate about, I'm calling you to Entrepreneurship 2.0. And that's something that's different than the model that we saw before. Because when we saw before, the problem with the model before is it's all about growth, and it's not about substance. And that's what's going to change. It's about people. It's about changing the world. It's about evolving humanity. If you're working on a project or a startup or something today that you don't feel is fundamentally changing the world, in changing how humans interact with each other, you need to stop doing it and start doing something that will change the world. Because that's the kind of stuff that is going to pull Arizona into the forefront. It's not about economics anymore. It's about people. So our experiment with Gangplank was, what if we did something to try to change the world? What if we tried to do something to change our little part of town, our little part of Chandler, Arizona? What if we did something that tried to make an impact there? And so as part of that, we've tried a whole bunch of things. Most of them have failed miserably. Even the ones that failed miserably, other people seem to think they're success. And we say, like, we feel so bad at this, I don't know why anybody is giving us any accolade at all on this, because we know the potential is so much higher. But what it did allow us to do is it allowed us to treat it like a petri dish. And it allowed us to look at what we were doing with intention and say, what can we learn from this to take to other people? And so what we learned is that there's a formula, or there's a theory to how entrepreneurship 3.0 or 2.0 or whatever you want to call the next iteration is. And that's the first thing, is it's about chaos. Okay? The way our mind works is we are pattern matching machines. We are regex on steroids. Okay? What happens is our brain processes something once, it processes it a second time, and it commits it to memory. The best example of this is if you drive more than 5 miles or 5 minutes to work, which probably most of you do, you go the same way every single day. And at some point you hop in with your spouse and or your kids, and you get in the car and you're going past your work to somewhere else, and all of a sudden you just turn off and the other person in the car goes, what are you doing? Where are you going? And you're like, oh yeah, it's because your brain's not thinking about it. Hey, I got in the car about the same time of the day. We're going the same route. I know exactly where I'm going. Don't you worry your pretty little self. I'll get you there. And then somebody interrupts it. We do the same thing every single day. When we come into work, we come into things, we get in patterns, okay? And that actually stifles us. And so one of the things we try to do with Gangplank is make it as crazy as possible. Because what happens is when your brain gets interrupted, and this rate, we call it interrupting the regular scheduled programming of your brain. When that happens, your brain is always on edge. Okay, what's coming up? What's coming up? What's coming up? I'm waiting. And it doesn't get into those patterns as much. When you see that happen, what happens is you start to unlock creativity. Because you're opening your brain up to new possibilities, to new ideas, to new ways to think about things, to new diversity, to new interactions. And when you do that, you unlock all sorts of creativity. You start to have ideas fly. You start to think, oh man, I drove by this and I noticed this and I was thinking about this. You start to notice the little things in life that normally just pass you right by. And once you start to do that, you've got really good ideas. But the problem is, anybody who's in the startup business knows that ideas aren't worth anything. Okay? And the reason why ideas aren't worth anything is because the really good ideas are curated. The really good ideas are vetted. And the only way to curate and vet ideas is to share them with other people. And so we said we need to create a space that encourages people to share their ideas. Because what happens is when I have an idea and I share it and somebody gives me feedback and they've got a different perspective and they're coming from a different walk of life or a different business structure, they're able to add things I can't see. And I'm able to kind of remix those and push them around and push them in. And then I share them with more people and more people and more people. And what starts to happen is two things. Is number one, I get an idea that I'm not sure where my idea started and my idea ended and whose fingers were in what parts of it, because it's morphed so radically. But beyond that, because I've shared that idea with a group of people, I've got a set of people that support my ideas. So when I try to move it forward, I'm not moving it forward in a vacuum. I'm moving it forward with a set of people that are supportive of me. And we call that collaboration. Now what happens is when we start to make that collaboration, we're starting to make ideas that are valuable. And when they're valuable, that means they get put to use. So whether they're monetized, whether they're adopted, whatever, the ideas are taken and found to have value. That's innovation. And so we started to say, okay, Gangplank is about creating a physical place and about creating a movement that encourages these interactions to happen. The two things we noticed after we put that formula together is there's two key components that surround those activities. One of them's fun. There's something about being in a state of play that helps accelerate all four of those things. When you can act like a 13-year-old and get away with it, I think we saw some people riding bikes around here and doing different things. When you get to a point where you're able to play, it unlocks something else in your brain that accelerates that chaos, accelerates that creativity, it gives you permission. And the best example, I think Ken Robbins says it best, right? Is if you pull a 3-year-old up on this stage in front of all these people, maybe a 5-year-old, 3-year-old's kind of shy sometimes, pull a 5-year-old up here and I say, sing a song, they'll probably sing a song and everybody will bust up laughing, and that will actually make them sing the song more and sing it louder and get crazy, right? But if I bring a 30-year-old up and I say sing a song in front of all these people, they go, F you. And if they don't go F you and they actually try to sing it, if you all started busting up laughing, they're going to run right for that door and never want to see any one of you ever again unless they're highly inebriated. In which case they act like a 13-year-old or a 5-year-old and they'll get up here and get crazy the louder you laugh, right? You see this at karaoke, right? And so part of the fun is getting people back into a stage where it's okay if you laugh at them. It's okay if you tell them their idea is crazy because it's not personal anymore. They're just having fun with it. Like, aha, I was just being funny. I didn't really think that was a good idea. And then the second one is excellence. And I think this is really, to me, I border it's between excellence and discipline, because I think you have to have discipline to have excellence. And so it's really about having the accountability of other people to tell you, you know what, that's great and you're doing great stuff, but if you really want to push it forward, you've got to do better than that. And you've got to do better than that. And you've got to do better than that. And you've got to do better than that. Because the difference between the people that make it and do great things and the people that don't is this big. It's so tiny. And the difference are the people that keep pushing through and keep pushing through and keep pushing through. I mean, is somebody who coaches soccer at a national level, is national certified, see, soccer players from all over the United States as well as the world. The difference between the people that make the U.S. national team and the people that don't, man, it is tiny. It is tiny. It's the littlest, bittiest thing. And usually for them, it's the difference between being able to do something with somebody coming on you full speed and giving you half a second to react, and somebody coming on and taking a second to react. Skill level independently by themselves is identical. It's the ability to do it improv, to be able to do it on the fly. That's the big difference. And so you need people around you that hold you accountable and hold you excellence and push you and drive you to greater things. So why does it matter, right? Why am I up here talking about this? Why does it matter? Why does Gangplank care about these things? Because the world is changing. Complexity is increasing. Creativity is desired. If you don't believe me that creativity is desired, Wall Street and corporations get this. CEOs, IBM study, number one trait they want in their top management team. 68% cite creativity is the most important thing needed in their management team. The second thing on the list only had 35% support. That's huge. So the number one thing, twice as important as anything else, creativity. because they know their companies are dying. They know they can't compete with the future. They know they can't compete with millennials who care more about people than care about profit. And because of that, they are doing everything possible to say, how do we change? They are clinging to a dying model. So do you see the future? It's about creativity. It's about collaboration. It's about innovation. That's what Gangplank's all about in a nutshell. So the number one takeaway, creating companies isn't about making and selling stuff. It's about being human. When we are able to be vulnerable, we unlock the greatest potential in each other to be creative. Sharing that experience and openly collaborating unleashes the ability to innovate. So I ask you, do you want to be an entrepreneur or do you want to be a revolutionary? So how does this apply to your world? Stop waiting. Start doing. Be the change you want to see in the world. How do you get involved in Gangplank Tucson? Through initiatives. Through business. Through studios. Through Gangplank Junior. Through working with municipal government. Teaching people how to re-engage. Teaching your government how to be relevant again. Through labs. Through health. Through academy. Or through the actual everyday operations of Gangplank. Just being able to show up and be supportive. You'd be amazed at what that does. So I'd encourage you to talk to Scott or Jackie if you're interested in being a revolutionary for the future and getting involved in these initiatives. Because the truth is, doing Occupy somewhere isn't going to do shit for Tucson. Getting out there and doing something that makes a difference is going to do something for Tucson. And you know what? What we're doing in Chandler, same thing. What we're doing in Avondale, same thing. We can't sit around and wait for state legislature to make the future we want because they've shown for the last 30 years they're incapable of doing that. But we can make the change we want, and we can make it now and let them kind of come in and ride our coattails and say Arizona's doing great things. And you know what? We should be okay with that because at the end of the day, we just want a better future for Arizona.